Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming in spite of the crummy weather. So, because of the crummy weather, Nipun is a little delayed, but he will be here. We're hoping within 15 minutes. And so, I'm going to introduce Nipun, assuming he's going to come, so we'll save time on that. This was planned. And if he's still not here, then we'll try to hear from you and get to know each other a little bit. So first, a little bit about the context of this class. So this is a class which used to be called Voluntary Social Systems. It's now called Designing a Free Society. But it's really about the use of voluntary systems in society to solve most of our social problems. In fact, the fundamental thing that I've taken away from this class is that voluntary systems are not just the icing on the cake, they can actually be the cake itself. And that's a pretty radical idea if you think about it, that all the social structures we have come to take for granted, taxation, subsidies, and all the government involvement in our lives, it's come to a point where we can't think of a society which is otherwise. And so this class pulls the rug from under our feet and makes us imagine that if we had to do it again from scratch, how would we do this from a voluntary perspective? And this differs, I think, in an important respect from what we label as a philosophy. And this, people often associate libertarian ideology with markets, and that markets can solve all problems. But I think one of the big assumptions behind markets, or implicit in the frame of markets, is the transaction mentality. And the idea of voluntary systems goes far beyond transactions. And markets are just one of the tools you have to manifest a desire to serve. And there are many other ways. And so our speaker today, we couldn't find anyone better than that to embody the notion of going beyond transactions. That should be him. So that's the basic spirit and the frame with which we're looking at this. So this is coming at the end of a series of discussions and talks. So we've mostly shown films of other people being the change, and we've seen them on camera. But Nipun's story is so unique that it's an amazing opportunity to see someone in flesh and blood who is spending his life serving others. So I don't know if he's going to share this, so I might as well just tell you a little bit about Nipun. So Nipun's story goes as follows. He did his bachelor's in Berkeley in philosophy and computer science, and he spent some time serving at a hospice, and that made him really reflect on life. And after that, he decided to do something meaningful. So he took a bunch of volunteers and friends, and he went to a homeless shelter and asked them, how can we serve you? So they asked him, well, what can you do well? And he was a really good programmer. So they said, well, can you build us a website? So they built a website for this homeless shelter. And then they found that they could use that skill to serve other organizations. And soon their first venture started where anyone wanted a website, they would just build it, no questions asked. So they kept doing this for a while, and then they found that it wasn't really about website development, but it was about service. So they kept stepping it up in different ways. And one of the turning points in his life was when he was called for I think it was a UN youth forum or something, and everyone had these prepared scripts to read out, and he had his own where he would talk about his organization and how good it was. And as he was about to get up there and talk, he just reflected on all the other people who had spoken before him, and something didn't go well. And he just felt that he could not ask for money, he could not praise his organization. Something just felt fundamentally wrong. So he tore up his speech, and he made a decision that he wouldn't talk about his organization at all. Instead, he gave a talk on compassion and kindness. And the funny thing is, after he finished, everyone ran for him and so what organization are you in, and how can we help? So he took that experience and he decided to make it an operational principle that all the different organizations he started, they just have this fundamental rule: they will not ask for funding. And this is the exact opposite of everything else we've been told on how to make our marketing message good, do fundraising. The exact opposite. And so he explicitly states that principle as trusting the universe. And the surprising thing is the universe somehow supports what he's doing or what he's inspiring other people to do. So there are other unique features about Charity Focus, the organization. That's I don't even know whether to call that as the one organization that's connected to Nipun because he does so many things. But within that spectrum, the other thing is there is no central leadership, which is again the exact opposite of what conventional wisdom says, strong leaders, inspiring leaders. Yes, there are a lot of inspiring people, but what I've seen as a pattern is you get into these organizations and very quickly you start serving. And so another thing Nipun does, and I think you will sort of see that, I shouldn't really prime you about this, but he doesn't lecture about kindness, he just does it. So, because we're pretty well prepared by Stanford and other intellectual places to argue intellectually. But what Nipun does is he starts with the question, how can I serve you? And he does some act of kindness, which changes something in my heart. And then I'm wondering, well, if this guy is serving, then I should also step up and do something. And so in the scientific world, we have this theory of mirror neurons, that when you see something that other people do or someone's giving you love or hate, you kind of reciprocate. So in that sense, you can call it a scientific reaction that when someone serves, you are inspired to serve back. Come on in, Ali. So that's another part of it, that there is no central leadership, but as people get drawn in, each person becomes a center of service in their own right. So that's again the opposite of conventional wisdom. And for some, how many of you have been to Karma Kitchen? Okay, so I'll just tell you about this experiment. So they figured that they should, the ideas they're thinking of service without expectation, they should try it out in the transaction world and see if they can change the paradigm. So they started this, where else but in Berkeley, a restaurant where you walk in and the maitre d' tells you that your meal has already been paid for by someone before you, and you can choose to eat and leave, or you can choose to pay it forward for someone else, or you can serve however you wish. And the funny thing is, it has sustained itself for I think over 2 years now. And not only that, it has spread. So Berkeley, you can argue, okay, it's a kind of communist city, but Washington D.C., it has worked really well. I think they've celebrated the first year anniversary and going strong. And people love the idea that you can go into a restaurant where you actually get a check which says your bill is $0. And that just does something to people. So the last time I went, I remember someone started crying, and then another person burst into a song, said, I want to just sing. So we all stopped eating so this person could just perform. And then random people came and tagged us with gifts. So they just left it behind not knowing who would receive it. They got a box of cookies, and my wife got a handmade bag. And you just can't predict what the experience in Karma Kitchen is going to be. So that's an experiment which people have written about quite widely, and that's one of the things they do. But the heart of all of this, these different experiments is what Nipun and his family have been doing for over 12 years now, is that every Wednesday they get together and they open their house up for anyone who wants to come, and people just sit down in silence and in some sense meditation, but without any instruction. So people just come and share the silence for an hour, and then in the next hour there'll be some inspiring reflection that everyone goes around reading, and then their one family feeds every single person who comes, and we're talking about 40 or 50 people every week, and no questions asked, there's no payment, no donation, nothing. They will just do this. And the idea is they want to create a space where people come together to work on themselves from different traditions, different backgrounds. You could be an atheist, you could be a religious person, doesn't matter. So this they have done for 12 continuous years, more than that. Oh, there he is.
Oh, yes.
So I just kind of got started introducing you.
Good, I missed the intro.
Yeah, yes, you did. So without much ado, Nipun, the floor is yours. Oh, we need to connect your laptop. Okay, all right. So while he's catching his breath, let's see. Anyone else who knows him wants to add anything to what I've said so far? Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question.
Oh, you had a question?
Where is this gathering?
Oh, where is it? It's in Santa Clara. So I was telling them about Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And there's a website called ijourney.org. You just have to put your email in if you want to go one particular week, and then it'll tell you the directions, and that's it. You're in. So, yeah. And while he's setting up, another experiment he does is smile cards. Do you have some with you?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. So he encourages people to do random acts of kindness and leave that behind, saying you've been tagged. And it's traveled all over the world. Hundreds of thousands of people have used smile cards, and they'll ship it out for free with no questions asked. If you want smile cards to do acts of kindness in your community, you just have to ask for it and you'll get it. And there he has it in his hand.
I do.
All right.
That's good, man.
Nipun, you're on.
All right, thank you. Make it a little less informal. Thank you guys. I'm here. Yes, I made it. I come from a ways away. But what I thought, what I wanted to talk about, and perhaps we can dialogue more than me talking behind the mic. But what I wanted to share is really what I'm learning, and I'm learning more and more about the value of values. So I thought that at first we'd start with, I've got some stories about things that are helping me, I'm still catching my breath, deepen my awareness, looking a little deeper at things. It's so easy to look at everything as black and white, and how can you navigate through shades of gray? So that's something that I've been thinking about. And I want to use the example of the internet, which is something we're all familiar with, but we probably take a lot of its tendencies for granted. And so I want to probe a little bit more, and ultimately just be the change response, which is mine, and how I responded to it. So those are some of the things that I want to talk about. First, I want to tell you a story. I like stories because, well, I like listening to them and I like telling them too. Just because it's not as didactic as like, hey, this is what you should do. It's not so. It's not so prescriptive, I suppose, because you can make what you want. So last weekend I was at Karma Kitchen. Some of you may know Karma Kitchen. And I met this woman, Susan Schaller. Susan Schaller got hit by, I think, one of these ice cream trucks when she was 17. And she said, she had to drop out of high school. But she still wanted to learn, so she enrolled for some classes. She walks into this class and they're teaching sign language. And so she learned sign language. After she learned sign language, she's like always looking to see how she can be of service with sign language. And so she walks into this one class one time, and all these people who don't communicate with words are doing theater. And so she's like, oh wow, this is really cool. So she comes in and she's just engaging with this whole group of people doing theater without words. So it's powerful. But then she sees one guy in the corner, and he's just kind of seated there. And he looks like he's not a part of it. He really wants to, but he doesn't seem to be able to engage. Well, it turns out this guy was born deaf. And for 27 years, he had no idea, he was 27, he had no idea that sound even existed. And so common research tells you that I think you have up to 10 or 11 years, after which you're pretty much, it's like lost cause. You will never be able to know that sound even existed. So for him, see, I'm talking, right? And you may be nodding your head. So he just looks and he has no idea that sound exists. So he's trying to move his lips in the same way that I move my lips, but you don't respond in the same way. So he just says, look, I must be just dumb, because I'm doing this, and nobody's really responding. Whereas this guy does that, and he gets all this response. So it didn't occur to him. And it took him so long. And this woman, she actually, after 4 years of struggle, communicated to this guy, after so many practices, that there is sound. And he broke down in tears. This guy is just weeping and weeping. He's like, oh, now I get it. I'm not dumb after all. It's not just me, and all of a sudden a whole new avenue opened. He still couldn't use words, but it was profound, because discovered a new sort of avenue of value that he didn't even know existed. And so I go around the world, and I wonder how many realms of value that we're missing out on. Just amongst ourselves, just in exchanging with each other. So that's something really that I think about a lot. Right? Einstein often alluded to this. He says, if you create a problem at this level of consciousness, you're not going to be able to, have a real solution unless you change the level of consciousness. So what is that next level of intelligence that will give us solutions to what we're talking about? She wrote a book, actually. Oliver Sacks said that what she did was impossible. And when she went, and she's like, look, come and see, you could meet this guy. And he did. And Oliver Sacks was so blown away. He's like, you have to write a book, Susan. And so she wrote a book called The Man Without Words. Amazing woman, just a bundle of love. So this idea of looking deeper is something very interesting. Right? Sometimes you look at something and say, wow, that's amazing. Look at something else and say, wow, that's amazing. And then you look a little deeper and you say, well, those are kind of contradictory, and I don't really know where I stand. There's a lot of homework that needs to be done. Like this guy, Tom Shoes, Blake Mikowski, I think I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name, but he was traveling, and on one of his trips to a developing country, he sees a bunch of kids without shoes. And so he says, I want to do something about it. So he's like, okay, I'm going to create a brand of shoes. We're going to call it Tom's Shoes, and they're going to be really slick and cool. People are going to pay a lot of money for every pair that anyone in the US buys. They'll donate a pair to somebody in a developing country. Sounds really cool, right? And it's a really awesome example of social entrepreneurship. This guy's done a lot. Blake's a great guy. And here you see him putting those shoes on. I don't know if does anybody have Tom's shoes in this room? Wow, okay. He's got ways to market them. This guy is Chris McDougall. And Chris McDougall, as you can see, is running barefoot. He had a knee injury. And at one point, he tried all kinds of things and it wouldn't work. And he was a runner and he couldn't run. So at one point, he happens to be in Mexico, runs into this hidden tribe. And these guys in this hidden tribe, they run barefoot. They've been doing it as a way of as a way of being. Like running is a part of who they are. And these guys just run and run and run, and they don't have any shoes on. It's like, oh yeah, don't you guys know you're supposed to have shoes? Otherwise, it's like, no, we've been doing this for a lot longer than your civilization's been around. And he's just running barefoot. And so he's got a bestseller out that's been on the New York Times bestseller list for months and months and months, called Born to Run. And these guys in Tarahumaru, if I'm not mistaken, Tarahumaru tribe, they're amazing. In the Death Valley, they have this competition, ultra marathon. 100 miles of running, like day and night. You're just running. It's like, forget marathon, ultra marathon. And these guys, one time, they're invited to it, and they come up, and they're like simple people. They don't really know how you're supposed to be at a race. I'm pumped up. I'm going to beat everybody, set the world. They don't have any of that. They just kind of casually stroll on down, and some, co-competitors are like, what are they doing? Is this like, do we have the janitors, or what are they, Because they don't really have shoes on. So they got sandals. So they start running, and these guys are on the starting line, and they got sandals on. They're about to run 100 miles through Death Valley. It's like, you gotta be kidding me, right? Except that one of them breaks the world record. And they're like, in between they stop, they're like admiring the view. This is what we do. It's like, yeah, it's like, what's the rush? Calm down, they look at the view, hang on, and they start again. And they won, and it's like, oh yeah, you got this trophy. They didn't even care for that. They said, why are you running this? Well, I'm running because, there's a lot of problems in our community, and we're a poor community because we can't assimilate with the commercialized world, and so we just need some rice. So they were running for rice. So, that's a long story, but, you look at that, and you say, okay, Tom's shoes, great, right? You're putting shoes on. But then there's this guy in New York running bare feet. And now it's like there's a whole movement around running bare feet. So where do you stand on that? Right? Do you go out and support Tom's shoes, or do you start running bare, or do you even have shoes on yourself? There's no boom. This is the prescriptive answer. You have to really probe deeper. So the internet is interesting because I want to apply this idea of, I just got on Buzz. I'm not on Facebook, but I got Gmail, and so I'm on Buzz, and I posted a little update. Oprah was chatting with Thich Nhat Hanh, and Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese monk nominated for Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King Jr. He's done a lot of stuff. He's 83 years old. Oprah says, as she asks everybody, what do you know for sure? And he says, I know that we have to release our views. I know that we don't know. I know that if we have to climb the next rung of intelligence, we have to drop everything in this rung of intelligence. If we don't have the capacity to drop our views, to release ourselves from that, we won't climb to the next level. As an individual, as a collective, as humanity. And so I really wonder about a lot of the views that we hold, that we haven't questioned in a deeper, penetrating way. So this is a lot. If I had more time, I would have made them come one at a time. But in the next 60 seconds, just to give you an idea of what's going on in the internet, 145 million emails will be sent out. 2.7 million YouTube videos will be watched. $43,681 will be spent on eBay alone. This is 60 seconds, right? Every 60 seconds. 83,273 people will log on to Facebook. Love will be Googled 4,260 times. That's good. At least it makes it. 2,000 tweets, and 10 children will still die. So all the advances that we've made. Yesterday I was actually at a conference with a Nobel laureate here at Stanford, and it's a group of people, maybe about a dozen of us, talking about markets. And one of them was like, hey, after 30 years of microfinance, I went to Bangladesh, man. They're still poor. Right? So what are we doing with all of this if at the end of the day, 10 children every 60 seconds are dying from hunger, and we even produce enough food in the world for everybody to survive? So there's a lot of these questions, like what technology for what? Right? And I'm a technologist, so I ask these questions all the time. Recently, edge.org asked one question to all the key visionaries around the world. And this year's question is very interesting. It says, how or does the internet change the way we think? I think the question probably was, how does it change the way we think? It is quite accepted now that the internet changes the way we think. I mean, that's dramatic. A technology that's been around maybe 1 or 2 decades is changing the way we think. And how is it doing that? Are we conscious of it? Have we reflected on that? Nicholas Carr on the cover of Atlantic Monthly, I think, he wrote an article that started off this whole debate. He says, is Google making us stupid? This is how he spelled it. Because Google's at the end of the day, it's built on machines. The machines are built, what did they understand? Ones and zeros. Right? And is everything 1 and 0? Right? You look at a piece of art. Is that a 1 or 0 response? Is everything binary? Right? What happens when music is reduced to MIDI? Then you don't have those interludes in between because all digital music has start and a stop at some point. I mean, these are fundamental things that you got to think about. We look at the experience with you put a smiley face, right? Or you say LOL. Right? What's the experience of cracking up and really laughing out loud and writing LOL yourself in an email? And we've reduced everything. It's like a smiley face, right? You genuinely smile, or you put a colon and a parentheses. I mean, how can you really replace that? And you say, no, not really. I don't really mean laugh out loud. It's a representation. But then if all art is reduced, if you look online and what people are creating and what people are learning from, it's all of this kind of representation, and it's somehow missing a whole dimension. Right? And so, how does that affect us? This was great because they're saying that usually we have so much data coming at us, and the way we process it, it's like we have to have filters, and the way we process it is through intuition. I get a certain sense of these things, and how now you're going to have algorithms do that for you. Because we are all experiencing information overload. So do you trust algorithms over intuition? Esther Dyson, big venture capitalist, said, internet is a bunch of empty calories. It's like sugar. Leaves you hungrier than before. You know it's not good for you, but you just keep having it and having it and having it. Clay Shirky says publishing is the new literacy. You got millions of people that don't even know how to read or write. And he's saying, well, yeah, that may be true, but you know, it's like now with publishing becoming almost ubiquitous everywhere, that's the new literacy. So reading and writing is not enough. You have to know that it's like easy to publish, and if you can't publish it, you're going to be at a serious disadvantage. Right? These are people on the forefront of technology talking about all of this. So it's kind of like a Brave New World in a way. You know, the famous Huxley book. You get 7 billion new connections, but how deep do friendships really go? Steve Ballmer, I think, was quoted, CEO of Microsoft at the moment, said, you know, when I grew up, I had 5 or 6 friends that were on my streets. Now kids growing up have 236 Facebook friends on average. But really, do they? I mean, what does friends have? We just changed the definition of friends. You meet somebody here, you're like, oh, you're on Facebook? Okay, cool, you know, we'll be friends. But what does that really mean? You know, are we changing the definition? How deep is it going? This is interesting. More than half of the world's population now has mobiles. In a couple of years, it'll be 5 out of 6 billion. But 33 of them are 11-year-olds. I mean, rather, a third of 11-year-olds in the US have mobile phones now. Look at this graph. This is like stunning. 2005 and 2009. Look at that 80.5% rise. These are 10 to 11-year-olds. So you have 33% of the people, 33% at least, of 11-year-olds having mobiles. And every minute there's 20 hours of YouTube video that's like blasted on YouTube. It's like uploaded. Every minute there's 20 hours of YouTube video uploaded. 50% of all internet traffic is pornography. And New York Times just posted a story, I want to say maybe 2 months ago. New research. If your kids are awake, they're probably online. They're spending that much. It's like they got to be plugged in. I mean, a lot of people just sleep with their mobile phones because it has an alarm on it. It's like we're constantly there, right? I mean, these are things that you have to probe a little deeper. I do. I feel like I do. Handwriting's getting outdated, and so are humanities majors. Interestingly, 30% of all majors in the 70s. Now it's 16%. Everybody's going to business, right? Oh, I want to change the world. Great, let's reduce everything down to a business. Or does that really work? Some things do. You know, business has a lot to offer. But can we just be so blindly reductionist? Wisdom of crowds is now showing up as meanness of mobs. There's lots of new books coming out talking about this. Right? And these are, so take a look. So I want to go through a few more examples, right, of what this means, like the pros and cons, gray areas. Because there's no like, oh, we should just ban internet, ban technology. But at the same time, we can't just let it go and free ride in whichever direction. Wikipedia, everybody knows crowdsourcing. Everybody submits a few edits, and wow, together we have this wonderful phenomenon. Right? It's like we collectively built this entire pile of knowledge. But on the other side, so a lot of people say, okay, this idea of crowdsourcing is great. Right? X Prize says if you solve a really complex problem, we'll give you millions of dollars. So they have these contests, and you say, okay, that's cool for niche projects. Innocentive is a company that says, well, you don't have to solve such big, complicated projects. The thing with X Prize is they may give you 10 million, but people spend like hundreds of millions to try to win that $10 million prize. So you wonder if it's efficient. Right? Everybody thinks they can beat the other person to get that prize. So Innocentive is a bit more distributed in that sense. They don't solve such complex problems like going to Mars and whatnot. They say, hey, look, you know, we want to solve this chemistry problem. We want to put more paste in Colgate, you know. If anyone can do that, we'll give them $50,000 because we don't want to go through the hiring process and HR and orientation. It's just complex, right? So if you can solve this problem, great. So Innocentive says we take a problem, put it out to the masses. If somebody solves it, we give them the money and we keep our cut. Everybody wins, company's happy, this person in between, Innocentive's happy, and the end guy gets money, right? Good, sounds good, so far so good. then you have these, they said, okay, well, you know, this is usually our problem. We don't really know when to stop, right? So we say, well, you know, there's all these moms that might be at home. Maybe they want to earn a little bit of extra money. And so what if we, you know, maybe it's not like incentive kind of problems, but maybe we reduce them down to a little bit, you know, make it a few simpler tasks. Okay, so they have this thing called mompreneurs. Raises some questions, but you say, okay, still doesn't seem too bad. Then Amazon comes out with this thing called Mechanical Turk. And Mechanical Turk says, you know what, let's outsource all the grunt work. And let's do it in small bites. For example, I'm a spammer. You have a website, and you have a form on your website, and you put those little capture puzzles, right? To make sure spammers don't spam you. I'm a spammer, I want to spam you. I got to break your form because it requires a human. So I say, you know what, this guy in a developing country is just kind of hanging out anyways, he needs jobs, needs work. I'm going to give him a few pennies so he can break that capture puzzle, send me that code dynamically, and I will be able to spam on this stuff. I mean, if this doesn't start to look like online sweatshops, I don't know what does. Right? You go to dig.com and you say, okay, everybody ranks like the best articles. And when you go, you know, when you look at all these different articles, you say, okay, they're voted on. So there's a site which says, hey, you want to make a buck? Vote for our article. If you're buying these votes, undermines the whole system. So this is Mechanical Turk. Outsource your grunt work because you're really smart and intelligent, and all those other guys out there who don't have the money and the resources, let them do all the grunt work. And what does that mean? What does that mean for society when you start to create these kinds of designs? They said, hey, it's a bad economy, so we want to try that. But there's a lot of people not very happy about Mechanical Turk. Then it gets even more complex and subverted, which is games. So people start to play, a lot of these games start off as like, research projects. Right? The big Google wanted to tag all their images, and so they just made a game out of it. It was actually a research project, and then they took that on. They bought it over. But they just have people like play games that helps them tag images. Well, that sounds great. But there's a lot of other things where people are just pressing, like, oh, this is a really cool game, I really want to play this. But they don't know what that processing is helping. Like maybe that's actually helping build a bomb, and they just don't know it. Right? So there's all these games that on the surface look fun and entertaining, but underneath it, there's all these questions about where exactly is the output of that going. We're so disintermediated from all of that. This was fun. So this is another thing. So now then you apply all this and you say, okay, crowdsourcing, how does that look like in the real world? How does that look like applied to cool things? Well, cool for me is kindness. So there was this woman at NYU. She made these cute little robots. And she said these robots can only go in one direction. And to survive, she put a little flag on each one, and they need human assistance. And the flag says, look, I need your help. If I'm stuck here, because I can only go in a single line, all of a sudden, boom, I'm stuck against that wall. I read the flag and it says, I need to get to this destination. Will you please point me in that direction? Right? And then it's like, okay, it goes in that direction. Then it gets stuck over there. And somebody else reads it. Okay, yeah, it's over there. So she didn't really think she made these disposable robots. She didn't really think it was going to go anywhere. Except that 100% of the times, the kindness of strangers made the robot reach the spot, reach the destination. Very cool, right? You say, wow, kindness. And she actually had a hidden camera behind, and she was watching people's reactions. One person even talked to the robot. Very cute, right? It's awesome. So it's the kind of stuff where you're like, you want to believe in this. This is great. But then there's the other side. It's coming out with the punchline. Don't read the bottom line. This guy created this thing called Kindness Machine. And he said, look, if you go out using Mechanical Turk, you go out, do an act of kindness, and you draw one of these like wonderful kindness machine things, and take a photo and upload it to my site. And if you do that, I'll give you 50 cents. Okay, so now I'm going around and somebody does an act of kindness for me, and I say, wow, the world's such a beautiful place. Or is it? Or did some guy just paying him 50 cents to do it? Right? What does that mean? There's no right. It's not a simple, trivial thing where you say good or right or wrong. It's like boom, boom, 1 or 0. It's like maybe the people helping this tween bot over there were paid a quarter by somebody who's trying to game the system. What does that really mean? I don't know. Those are questions to think about. This is great. This guy in Canada, this guy's like sleeping on the job, right? I mean, lots of people do that, except that, the Transportation Commission had hiked the prices up, and so one guy's like just going down, and this poor man, you hate to be this guy, he's just like slacking off, and this person takes a photo, tweets about it. It catches on like wildfire, protests everywhere. And these people are saying, look, this is a government service. You're paying too much to your people and not providing all these services and increasing our fares. That's just not fair. This has always been an issue, but now that they have this one photo, it just sparked the whole protest, and they had to make regulations around it. This is one guy noticing something, boom, passes it on. It's great. Power of a single tweet. Right? One person has that power. They don't have to have like incredible, advertising or budget. It's like each person can make a difference. It's true, in a way. You guys, you've heard about smile cards. Smile cards are amazing. Because here is a smile card in Japanese. Front is the same and the back is in Japanese. Bunch of kids. So smile card says, for those that don't know, you do a small act of kindness and you leave a smile card behind. It's anonymous. And because the person who receives it says, hey, why did you do it? I did it just out of the goodness of my heart. Pay it forward. You can't pay back. Fun. It's great. I mean, it's awesome. The million smile cards that we ourselves have printed. There's hundreds of thousands more that people download and print themselves. It's like started a whole revolution in many ways, a mini revolution. But nonetheless, it's like tens of thousands of stories, and people get excited, and it's really fun. It's kindness, and it's small acts, and anonymous, which means that you're selfless about it. It's not just about the ego. It's not about me and mine. I get credit. I want this. This is my A grade, right? This is my act of kindness, and it's cooler than everybody else's. It's like it's anonymous, so nobody knows about it, and it's cool. The internet allows for those kinds of things to happen, and we've done this. On the other side, this is Lori Drew, 2008. She decided to create a fake online identity. And she said that I'm gonna, how did the exact events go? Her daughter was having a problem with somebody else at school. Right? And she decided to create a fake identity and befriend her daughter's sort of quote unquote enemy. And she was a guy. She fell in love with this person, said all kinds of great things. You're this, you're that, you're sexy, and all of that. So then they decide to, they get really close. And at some point, she decides to just go to this person and just be completely cruel, saying people like you are not worthy of living. And this is less, I think a 13-year-old experiencing this from this woman. So that 13-year-old actually goes and commits suicide because of these interactions. And it was quite clear, Lori Drew did this. It was anonymous. She did it because that girl was giving problems to her daughter. So she created a fake personality on MySpace, goes in, befriends this person, tells them all kinds of cruel stuff. This girl dies. What does that mean? What does that mean about anonymity online? These raised a lot of issues. Right? And this just happened in 2008. We all know about free hugs, right? How many of you guys know about free hugs? Oh my goodness. Not everybody raised their hands. This guy in Australia, a young teenager, his grandmother dies, and so they decide to create, his buddies are like, we need to cheer him up. How do we cheer him up? So they created this music video. And in a couple days, this just went viral. Everybody's talking about it. And I think 2 or 3 weeks, they're on Oprah, and a week after, they have a whole recording contract, and it's just and everyone all over the world are doing these free hugs. Really exciting, really cool. On the other hand, last week, as they say, a 50-year-old black man and a 67-year-old white man, Russo, got into a fight. And people love to get into fights, right? And this guy, the white guy, landed, I think, 19 punches on this black guy. And so there was a whole, you can debate the whole, what happened, what's good, what's right. But it's the fastest spreading public fight meme on the internet. So what kind of people are? I mean, it's like people are like, yeah, let's forward this, man. Yeah, this guy like landed 19 punches on the other guy. Viral video. That's the world we live. This is last week, right? Look it up on Chronicle. You'll see this. I mean, it's like, and the black guy calls ambulances in the way he pronounces it, and so all the YouTube videos are, a lot of them are like Amber Lights, because that's the way he pronounced ambulance, you know, and like, so it's like, it's derogatory in many ways. It raises a lot of questions, Igniting movements. This was really cool in Moldova. This guy, you know, this hashtag on Twitter. You have these hashtags, and the hashtags launch. They allow you to theme something. And so on Twitter, there was a guy, I think with 24 followers or something like that, just an everyday guy. He started this hashtag, and the hashtag created an entire movement. This movement protested elections. They had second elections, and a new party came into power. So this is all because of one guy with 24 followers. 24 is like, on internet, it's like very few. Right? With 20, he was responsible for creating a hashtag that supported an entire movement. Amazing. That means you and I, anyone, right, could do something. And it's really cool. But on the other side, I mean, there's some really depressing stuff out there. And I don't mean to depress you. I'll get to the more inspiring stuff, you know. But this is Kathy Sears. Kathy Sears, a public speaker, you know, going out spreading good things. She somehow, online, there's this thing called trolls. So trolls are people who just like to say mean things, and they all aggregate, and they just like, you know, you go online, and it's just very easy to say these mean things, so they do that, right? And so she, I mean, I don't even feel like saying what they did. I mean, they remixed all her photos and videos and of her being sexually violated. This is all like graphically done with her corpse all around, and she had no connection to any of this. They couldn't figure it out, except that a gang of people just decided she was the person. Let's go and attack her. And they wanted her kids to see a video of her corpse online. It's like, it's really bizarre and demented. But this is very real. Kathy Sears, she says she used to speak at conferences. Doesn't go anywhere now. She says, I'm even afraid to leave my house. So the cyberbullying is like a very real thing, right? This is, I also don't know how to pronounce her name, but Choi Jin-sil was South Korea's nation's actress. She at one point started getting attacked by these trolls to the point that she committed suicide. Like, a nation's actress. And so like the Korean government's like, look, we got to do something. They've put 22,000 people on a blacklist. Right, saying like they're soon to arrest them, as they say. Right? But this is like a woman that committed suicide because of all these trolls. So they're just like you have good people doing good things online, you have a lot of people that just seem to get this, they call it lulls. I do it for the lulls, the sadistic pressure. There's even a word for it that they use. So where do we stand on that, right? This is my last time. I mean, this is kind of, you say, okay, well, there's the good and the bad, right? To all of this, to everything. You can use a knife to kill somebody or to save somebody's life. Where do we stand on this? Is this the same thing with all the things that we are using every single day? Perhaps that some of you are using with your laptops right now. TED Talk last week. Last week, I think, or a week and a half ago. Jane McGonigal, somebody that I actually had lunch with her, so I'm not trying to say anything negative, but this was one of her slides. It says, so far we've spent 5.93 million years playing World of Warcraft. And her response is, she's created this game to try to save the world. So you create these virtual reality games, and you're actually solving real world problems, you know, so to make it really fun. And she says, you know, look, reality is broken. We need to play more games to fix it. So she's saying we play 3 billion hours per week of online games. She says, if we really want to save the world, we need to step it up. We need to play 21 billion hours. So to motivate people to do this stuff. This is TED Talk. TED is like on the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff. This is last week. This is her slide from last week at TED, right? You have all the millionaires and billionaires, designers of the world, all are there. And this is the kind of thing that they're thinking about, and that's great. You know, in many ways, it's like, look, if we're all just about fun, 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 let's use that fun to try to save the world. That's great. I agree with that. But at the same time, if it's just that, if that's the only thing that motivates us, man, we got serious problems, right? Because here's the other thing. To lose weight now, what do you got to do? Well, you're not just going to do it because to do it. You need more motivation. We're going to give you fame, right? That's this show. The person who loses the most amount of weight, it's this reality show, right? I can't motivate myself just to lose weight and do the right thing. I need some fame to pump it up. And this is not the right photo, but I was in a rush. Blackberries, I Googled Blackberry, and I got this photo. A real life Blackberry. But a new program, also announced, I think, 3 weeks ago, in DC. They said, we have a lot of people smoking. We need to get them to stop smoking. Good goal. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's give them all a BlackBerry. Not this kind of BlackBerry, the real one that handheld device, right? So they're basically saying, look, you stop smoking, we'll give you a BlackBerry. And we've got all these programs on BlackBerry. You can keep in touch. Now you're connected and all this. They're spending $1 million on this. So you think about this in the sense. We also, by the way, pay kids. We have programs now where kids aren't going to school in developing countries. Well, let's pay them. Right? So there are programs where you actually use financial incentive to get kids to go to school. What does that mean for society? So now we pay kids to go to school. We give out BlackBerries to stop smoking. We build games for social change. We use fame for losing weight. So what's the next level of incentive? Right? We just keep going and going and going, right? Where does that lead us? Right? These are very real questions. Right? Do we need to be drugged up? Does everybody, like, what if I was a speaker? I don't know. Maybe I am. What if I was a really boring speaker? Right? Or that I had like very blah, now I'm going to talk to you about this, but I've spent my whole life's work doing this. Would you listen to me? Or do you need to be entertained? Or do you need to be drugged up? Would you just listen, look in my eyes, and say, look, I support your journey because you're a human being. You know, you put your whole life behind this, and it's okay if you don't speak in the most entertaining way. Because I care, because you are a human being. Or do we just say, forget it. I'm out of here, man. This guy's like, I'd rather watch MTV. You know, it's like way more fun. Right? I mean, there's a capacity to actually be with somebody just because you care. What is that incentive? And have we forgotten that incentive for what is that motivation? And how do we design things with that in mind? It's a question I ask all the time. So this is one response. I'll tell you a few stories. I mean, that's all I know how to do, right? So this is the wrong spelling of Gandhi, but it's okay. I'm a big Gandhi fan, so I feel like I can do that. I actually didn't do that. But this is one response, which is my response, which is then percolated into this thing called Charity Focus, which is the response of many people. We started an organization, as some of you will know, that built websites for nonprofits in 1999, and that grew into web services and grew into a whole platform. We had 3 rules, principles, founding principles. One was we're going to be volunteer run. It's like, what do I get from this, man? Nothing. Are you still willing to do it? That's the challenge. Do you still care? Right. And what that meant was we really worked with inner transformation, because really you can't just do something and not get anything in return. But sometimes what you get in return is very subtle. Right. And so because it's subtle, do you discard it? We say, no, we don't. We don't. The second thing was we don't do fundraising. Once again, very different kind of, it means there's no staff. Right? Because we're never going to kiss up to somebody because of what they have or because of what we can get from them. It's just very real, very human. It forces us to trust the ripple effect. And the third thing was we're going to do small things. Assume value in every part of the process. Look at everybody and say, hey, who knows what door this opens? Who knows? You never know. So the power of non-financial incentives. I mean, this is, organized by Sarvodaya in part. So this is a man that I recently met. One of these sort of Gandhian heroes, I would say, of the world. How many of you know him? Of course, Gandhi. This guy, his name is Anna Hazare. Anna Hazare is probably a quiet hero of our times, but we've probably learned to, we've probably lost our capacity to honor such people. He decided, he was from a village. He went to the army, he killed people, he almost got killed. He had a transformation. He says, I want to serve. And he says, I'm going to serve the village that I'm from. Because in my village, everybody's drunk, they're being violent, there's no school. And so he goes out to his village. And the first thing he does is like, okay, look, we need a school. We need to straighten everybody out. And they started to build a school. They said, the government asked for their permission. They said, no, you're not ready. We're not ready to give you a sanction to start a school in your village. He says, you know what? I don't think that's right. And if you're looking for bribes, you're not going to get it from me. And on top of that, I'm going to go on a hunger fast until you guys change your mind. If you don't care, then I'm going to go away. And he didn't publicize it or anything except that hundreds of people joined him in that hunger fast, and the government had to change his decision. They built a school. Then he looks at all those people in their community and says, like, look, let's go out and do something concrete, do something solid, right, based on these principles. So they start doing all kinds of different projects in their community. And this, it's Relgaon city in Maharashtra, is a model village now. And he has one rule. He says, look, we're not going to take any money from outside. If we want to change this, we have to discover the gifts in this circle in our village, right here. And we have to be committed to it. You put in the work, I put in the work. He sleeps on the ground at a temple, uses the public bathroom. Public bathrooms in India, terrible. Public bathrooms in villages of India, really terrible. He says, this is what I'm going to use. Simple man, doesn't own anything. You go there. I met him last time I was there. Really powerful. He says, when you talk, you have to have, as he says, he doesn't speak too much English, but he speaks enough. He says, you have to have weightage. I said, what do you mean by weightage? Weightage, as he says. I said, what do you mean, Annaji? And he says, if you are doing what you believe in and you believe what you're doing, then your words are going to have a weight. And that's how you create revolutions. If you're just talking, or if you're just doing something because it feels good or you want to get ahead, it doesn't work. You have to move to a village, you have to stay there. It's not a short-term thing, it's a long-term thing. It's going to look small initially. It may always stay small, but you have to just keep doing that. And when you just keep doing that, everything you say is going to have a weight. What did I do? Ah, there it is. That's social change. That's the currency. Right? And that was Anna Hazare's thing. So he's created a whole model village using non-financial incentives. He says, what, you're going to bring some money in from outside. With the money comes know-how. What if that's not relevant in this community? And now that model village is spread all over the place. I mean, he's done like ridiculous. He's just basically fearless. He goes up to like corrupt politicians and he's like, yeah, I don't think you're doing the right thing. And they're like, yeah, we're going to kill you. And so they hire people to kill him. And the people that are about to kill him, they're like, yeah, you saved such and such's life in my community. No, I'm not going to kill you. I know they paid me, but I can't take this money, man. I'm not taking this. So he lives, even though all the corrupt politicians want him dead. This is a very simple man. He doesn't have anything. There's no security, no bodyguards, but very real and has a different kind of power, non-financial incentive. This is our meeting. I don't know how much you can see that over there, just from a couple weeks ago also. We had a book jam, small book jam of a bunch of people writing a book. Mr. Paul Van Slamberg, our superhero, who's in the back. I call him Pulitzer Paul, since he does have a Pulitzer to his name. We're writing a book, and so we thought, hey, we should all get together and create this book jam. And it's always so inspiring, no matter how many people that we all get together. When there's a non-financial incentive, there's a power to it. And so there was this guy on the second from your right, Riaz. He came in, everybody we knew, except Riaz. Riaz came as a friend of somebody. And we realize we do the circle of sharing. Everyone's like sharing inspiring stories. What makes him happy? It's like kicking back, like, he's a big real estate developer, so he's accomplished a lot. And I'm sure he's thinking, what circle did I get myself into? These guys are talking about goodness and serving the world. And then it was like, but there was a vibe in the room, as they say. And then his turn comes, and he's like, yeah, I got something to share. And he starts sharing the story of how he goes to Pete's Coffee every Thursday. And there's a woman with, I think he said, Down syndrome, who comes out because Pete hires these people and asks them the same 3 questions every single week. How are you? How's your home? How's your dog? Something like that. He responds to all of them and asks her 3 questions in return. This happens not just 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, every week for 4 years. Same 3 questions every Thursday. And now he looks for her. He's like, where is she? They're like, oh, she should be coming. She's in the back. He waits for her. She asks the same 3 questions. He responds in the same way. And he asks her questions. And she responds in the same way. And this was this guy. We thought he wasn't getting it. And then it's like, as we were all departing, he looks up and he's like, you guys are like grassroots group, and it's great. You like rented this house and all, but maybe it'd be nicer if you had a slightly bigger place. We're like, okay, yeah, sure. He's like, I live 10 minutes from here, and I've got a place that's much bigger than this. Why don't you guys just use that? And we're like, okay, this is a guy who, we weren't even sure, what he's getting out of this. And all of a sudden, by the end, he's totally, pumped up by this. And we're like, and the person who brought him, she's a big entrepreneur herself, and she's like, Nipun, take it. I've never seen him do this, Take it while you got it. And so I was like, okay, maybe I will. But, it's like, I said, what you really should do is, we'll think about the house and all that, but what you really should do is write that story out, because that would, go out to so many people and inspire so many people. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. He goes home. Maybe after 11 o'clock or something that night, we get a call. Hey, I was thinking, the house is here, and why don't you guys just use it tonight? This guy's just so blown away that he wants to just, he really wants to just express his stuff. And all of this happened not because we were trying to teach him something or change him or be like, yeah, this is the wrong way, this is the right way. It's just this power of this strength of non-financial incentives. What's our time looking like, sir?
We have 20 minutes.
20. All right, I'm going to try to go fast. That was real fast. I guess we started with, so another thing is we try to tap into the power of gift, right? Just raw giving. We started the web services, then Smile Cards. We did a magazine. There's Karma Kitchen. Karma Kitchen is amazing. I'm afraid to ask this in this crowd. How many people know about Karma Kitchen? Okay, okay, that's cool. It's a restaurant where your check at the end of your meal reads 0. Someone before you paid for your meal, and you pay forward for somebody after you. It's in Berkeley, downtown Berkeley, and the thick of daylight. You would think you can't get away with such stuff, but you can. I love talking about it at business schools. It's real fun. And then that gave birth to Karma Clinic, where somebody said, hey, why don't we apply this kind of a gift economy model where you trust that you deliver so much value that somebody's cup overflows. And you trust that they'll take care of you just because you have served them, right? Just spirit of gratitude, trust in that gratitude. And so they started doing naturopathic healthcare in Berkeley called Karma Clinic over there. So there's a whole range of these things where you just really trust in gift. And people are completely rocked. 2 days ago, this last Sunday, we run it every Sunday mornings. This last Sunday, I was volunteering. And there was there's all kinds of people. There was a couple that came and says, we need to know more about this. Right? I don't know if it was your table or might not have been, I'm not sure. But they start talking, it was Praveen's table. And these people, after hearing the stories, this woman's just in tears. Right? It's just like, they're just rocked. You just trust people like that. And I told her a bunch of stories of what happens, and people are just completely stunned. Right? One time somebody comes and says, you trust me to pay whatever I want? And we were like, yeah. Say, okay, here's 100. I trust you to bring me back whatever change you want. And so he's like, okay, well, how much change do I take back for him? So he pulls out his wallet, takes out a 20, says, here's 120, right? And the guy's just like completely stunned. He's like, who does that? Where? He's just like shaking his head. What's the value of all of that? It's just like, and who does that and where? It's just like completely out of the box, out of the paradigm. We're trying this with Smile Decks as well. So many projects. This is really cool in the sense that this is the third thing I would say is the power of good. Like when you actually do something that serves the whole, there's a different kind of a momentum that it carries. This artist came up to me one time past 1 p.m. and he's like, you know, I did a prayer for this girl who had this terminal disease, and I prayed and I drew an art piece. And it just completely floored me. And every time I think about it, I keep crying. So I don't know what it is, but I think it means something. I said, Jonathan, you should keep doing it if you feel so deeply called to it. He's like, yeah, I'd love to do it. Are there people who need prayers? Very innocent guy. I was like, yeah, actually one of my friends. Mom got diagnosed just last week. One of my friends, this was at that time, I said, just last week, one of my friends got diagnosed. His mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Dad had a brain aneurysm, went into a coma. He says, oh, I'd love to do art. There's somebody in the back of the car says, oh, I'm not an artist, but I'd love to, do something, maybe stick figures or so. And they started doing this, right? And so they would do a manifestation of their goodwill for this person that they don't know in Phoenix. And they're all here in this area. Dozens of people did this. People wrote this stuff and we would send him one every day. Just 2 weeks ago, his mom and dad passed away. Right? I mean, now they both passed away at different times, but now both of them have passed away. This guy writes in at one point and he says, look, I want to get 1,008 smile cards. Don't ask me why 8, but 1,008 smile cards. I'm so rocked by all the generous people, all the strangers that have bestowed their kindness on me. I want to pay it forward. And I'm going to do that by doing small acts of kindness for other people. What's the value of all of that? That's just like power of good, man. We did the same thing with Taco Bell hot sauce. One of my friends was hosting a bunch of people and they had burritos, and instead of salsa, she's like, goes out and gives everybody fancy salsa, and then she goes out and gets her own little stash of Taco Bell hot sauce on it, And so we're like, oh, wow, I didn't know you liked it. And she lived in London. And so in London, there's no Taco Bell. So what did she do? She would smuggle hot sauce from the US every time she goes back. And so Taco Bell hot sauce, I don't know, maybe this will get her in legal trouble. And then she was going through some health problems. And so we sent out a little note. It's like, hey, you guys, if you want to really tag somebody, we call it a tag, send Taco Bell hot sauces to this address. And people just floored her with hot sauce. I mean, you had professors sending her hot sauces, people writing notes, people writing, just heartfelt thank you notes. And imagine being on the receiving end. And this is a person who has actually done this for so many other people. And when we were at this retreat, she's like, you know what happened? I got floored myself because you know that it's coming and you don't know who it's from because it's from everybody. And so you don't even know who to thank. You can only pay forward because there's no paying back. And she says, my husband, who's a partner at a private equity firm, he didn't know how exactly to process this. This is the first day, okay, hot sauce. Second day, okay, hot sauce. Bringing it to her bed. Third day, more mail, more third. And she's like, by the 10th day, he was getting pretty, he's like, oh gee, I wonder what's in there, And it really had a transformation for him too. This is the power of good. If any of us are ever sick and somebody does this to us, I can guarantee you that it's going to bring you a smile. But yet, how many of us have actually proactively gone out and done that for someone else? Not many. So can we create that kind of value? Is it possible? It's very possible. It's possible even in this front row. We could all make a pact. It's yeah, let's go out and be a kindness army. It's not that hard. It just requires a certain frame of reference. We do this with a bunch of different projects, as most of you know. So the last slide is really that, when we started doing all of this in this way, we discovered abundance. We discovered new forms of value, new kinds of capital that we always knew existed, but we hadn't really trusted that process. Right? One of them was social capital. You see the power of just people. I mean, raw people. You talked about Wednesdays early on. Right? My mom has fed more than 20,000 people in her own home. It's not even exaggeration. This is not like saying, oh yeah, it's actually probably more than 25,000 by now. She just keeps doing it, and she doesn't even know all these people. And there's nothing special about her. She's not Gandhi or Mother Teresa. She's an everyday person living in a middle-class home that says, I'm going to open my door, I'm going to stand for these values, and I'm going to be of service. She's getting old. She started 12 years ago. Now she can't even lift. One time she had a hard time lifting all the pots, and she's like, this is really good for me, because I go to my, she goes to these like dancing, whatever you call it, I don't know, some aerobics classes, right? And she's like, all these young girls have problems with like these weights. I'm used to lifting the Wednesday pots, man. This is nothing, boom, boom, boom. Right? That's social capital. If she ever has any trouble, guaranteed there will be dozens of people at her door, without even me telling them, because this is just the power of social capital. If you've been served, you are going to serve them. And that density of interconnections, if we lose that, if it's just like, LOL online, it's not going to have the same effect. So social capital. Second thing is synergy capital, where the sum of the parts, if all of those people are actually trying to do the same thing, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. There's a new value that's created. They have research that shows if we're all in a circle and we're all resonating with the same thought, our heartbeats start to synchronize. So what is that? Can we do that? Can we do that in any moment? And when we do that, you actually create this new kind of value. That's amazing. We see that all the time across all the projects. I could tell you story after story. And the last thing is subtle capital. Right? It's that, I don't know what else to call it, but it's like there's a physical footprint, but then there's a mental footprint. And you may be doing all the right things to save the environment, but if you're just like a pain to be around, there's a footprint to that. Right? It can't be measured. There's no neat thing. There's no documentary called Inconvenient Truth, This is all inconvenient, a lot more than truth, It's like, but just because we can't easily quantify it, we're not able to tap into that. So what happens when you desire less? What happens when you're actually just doing the right thing? What happens when you connect with that stranger? What happens when you resonate at a much deeper level, at a much higher frequency? There's a subtle capital that's created. And it's powerful, it's real. It's what, if you look at the biographies of people ranging from Gandhi to Mother Teresa to Dalai Lama to Cesar Chavez, they all talk about this subtle kind of capital. Even Einsteins of the world talk about that. Right? So how do we actually see value in that? And so, I guess in summary, hey, there's MLK, before I get to the thunder quote. There's the internet. Internet's a tool. There's our lives at a very personal level. As we deepen our relationship to who we are, we become aware of a whole lot of things going on that we perhaps might have skipped before that. So as we see that, we see how interconnected, this is my experience, we see how interconnected we are with all things around us. And when we see how interconnected we are, we start to see how much we receive. We receive from our parents, from our teachers, from our friends, from our community, from the things that we use, from nature, from all kinds of ways. And when we are aware of that whole process, then we start to pay it forward, because your cup of gratitude has to overflow. Right? You're not receiving because of it's like, I'm smart, that's why I make a lot of money. Right? I'm smart, that's why I'm at Stanford. I'm smart because that's why I went to Berkeley. I can do all this because I went to Berkeley. This is not true. That may be a factor, but to reduce it down just for that is actually very reductionist. It's a lot more than that. It's a lot more complex than that. And we tap into that, I think your cup of gratitude definitely overflows. And you start to take stands that perhaps you may not have before. And I like this Martin Luther King quote, because it says, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And it's not just silent about, this injustice in the world and that. There's a lot of it is about being aware of the things that matter. So we've just become so numb that we don't even know what things matter. Right? What matters most? Well, what matters is, that I get cable at home, that I have internet access 24 hours of the day, or what is it that matters, right, if it's not that? So these are questions to ask, and then to actually take a stance on them is powerful and is the theme of my talk, I think. Thank you. Sure. Yeah, if you have questions, I can respond to them, and I will repeat them as well.
So it seems like a lot of this, like internet crowdsourcing, has to do with a sense of isolation. And so, what are ways you found that help break through that sense of isolation and bring people into a place where they can feel the gratitude and be, paying it forward, to feel involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a really interesting edge between online and offline worlds. There was an interesting paper out that talked about poverty in terms of your connectivity online. So the poorer you are, the more connected you are online, because you lack it in real life. That's why you go online to go find that. And so it's like, what are we getting in those online places? And what are we getting in the offline places? And how do we create a synergy of the two of them that's really deeply fulfilling for us? So I think one of the big equations is reconciling that divide between offline and online. Because there's a lot, even just you and I looking at each other, there's a lot more information that's communicated than if you had just emailed me, right? I mean, this is obvious, but I think there's a lot of that information is relevant to our deep fulfillment. So we have to really explore that edge. And I think we're all still young in exploring that, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And we struggle with that in some sense with giving and gift. If you give something to somebody online, like smile cards, there's a lot of people who just say, oh yeah, freebies, let me just take it, right, while I can. Versus at Karma Kitchen, when you actually serve them a meal, and they see that, oh, this is a human being, this is a volunteer, and they're taking their time out to do this. There's all kinds of different, I feel like there's much, I don't know the answer yet, but I feel like there's much more information that's communicated. So the online world it seems to be a bit reductionist. I mean, there is that vibe, that presence, that, it's so much information. It's just like from the smile and the hand language and all of that, right? So how do you replicate that online? And we, in some sense, we have to, right? Also, for us, because smile cards are distributed, through an online mechanism. So how do you make people understand that? And what is it? Do you add more context? So how do you make people feel connected and not isolated, not reduce them down? Open questions. How's that? I respond to a question with a question.
I had a few of them. You can answer any or all of them. I was just wondering, first of all, speaking of the smile cards, what's the
purpose?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a business card. To me, it doesn't have much practical value. It doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy like a real human being, giving me a hug or smiling at me would. So.
Yeah, no, well, let me respond to that, and then we'll go to the next ones, because that's a fundamental one. So I carry a smile card with me all the time. And what does that do for me? What that does for me, and I think there's some more in here, I hope. What that does for me is this. That I look at every opportunity as, ultimately I shouldn't need these stupid gimmicks, right? What this does is it forces me to say, look, I've got a smile card burning a hole in my pocket. Right? How am I going to use it? So I go into situations where I normally just would have glossed through it, and now I'm looking to do some small act of kindness. For example, I open my door, and I live on the 4th floor, go down every single day, right? Many times, on many days. One time I was going, and I had a smile card in my pocket. Noticed that my neighbor's trash was outside their doorstep because they were going to take it down whenever. So I said, oh, great opportunity. Let me take their trash down with me, because I got 2 hands. They're doing nothing anyways, right? So I picked up the trash, I took it, and I left a smile card behind. What happened to those people? You know, the smile card was gone, so they looked at that and they said, who took the trash away? Well, you've just been tagged. Experiments in anonymous kindness is the name of the game, and now you're it. So he tells them, oh, what am I doing? Okay, I got to go and do something kind for somebody else. And then guess what? A couple months later, one time I had a bunch of cardboard boxes outside, and lo and behold, the cardboard boxes were gone, and there was a smile card, right? I mean, I don't know if they figured out that I was the one who actually left the smile card or not. We've never had a conversation about it, but there's something beautiful about it. Right? Or you pay toll for the person behind you, or you pay for coffee for the person behind you. It serves as a reminder for them to go out and keep the chain going. Because we're so conditioned by our consumeristic response that it's like you just want to get. So as soon as you go and receive something, you're like, oh yeah, great, I lucked out, man, I got something free, you know? And it's like, no, you're actually, with a gift comes a responsibility to pay it forward.
Relating again to the smile cards, how's the smile card different from like a favor receipt? It's sort of like a receipt, and then to relate to that, what are your thoughts on this being gratitude versus guilt? So like your neighbor was just minding their own business, doing their own thing, and now they feel this obligation, this guilt, this indebtedness that they never asked for.
Yeah.
And they also have a receipt for it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, more than smile cards, even a more appropriate response is a meal, right? You have a meal at Karma Kitchen, and it's not just a smile card and anonymous. It's like, this group of people, it says that this is what it took, and it's up to you to pay it forward. And so how do you respond to that? And you can say, look, that just means, and we've had people come in and say, it's just guilty, man. It's like I would pay as much as I would pay at another restaurant. Like, why don't you just be upfront and straight about it? But the problem is, it's not, so if you look at two isolated cases like that, then it's true. It's much easier just to be straightforward. Give me, like, it's $5, I don't want to deal with this. Like, how, we're so conditioned to, like, just having a price on the whole thing. But you have to think about figuring out that, like, the process of actually going through value identification yourself. So how much is a smile card worth to you if your dog was lost and somebody was doing a homework assignment in school and a third grader is with their mom, and the mom goes, they find the lost dog and they drive it a couple miles down and give it to this owner and say, we just saw a lost dog, so, and this owner's just like ecstatic, and she says, here's a smile card, just pay it forward. What is the value of that 2-cent smile card to you? And this is a very hard question. But if we don't ask this question, if we just want to stay in this kind of a world, what happens is you start to reduce, and you become neighbors that you don't even care about your neighbors. Right? You're just like, I don't know who my neighbors are, I've never talked to them, It's like they do their own thing, I do my own thing. And as a result, you could have a guy next door who just committed suicide and you don't even know about him. Right? So it starts to, when you look at two isolated cases, you can say that, okay, one's much easier and clearer, but if you look at a direction that each one heads in, if you have this processing of value, like what is this worth to me and how can I be connected to life, that takes you in the direction of community. The other one takes you in the direction of, I don't need to deal with this, just give me cutting for it. It's like boom, boom, boom. You start to end up being like this old person who's got no friends and you're by yourself, your neighbor doesn't talk to you, and they don't care, you don't care for them. Right? So it starts to head in that direction. So I sense that it's more a question of which direction it goes in. And that is why I would favor going in the direction of gifting and connection and community.
I have this impression that man is by nature a social animal, right? And by nature we love friends, we love interaction. So for that reason, I would think that people are genuinely helpful. So when you're encouraging people via the smile card to be helpful, you think that's encouraging something that already exists? And
Absolutely.
also, for the Karma Kitchen, it becomes a kind of cycle where, the only thing you're proving is that people will break the cycle. It's a self-sustaining cycle because someone pays the meal and you pay for the next one. So it's not really proving an act of kindness. It's just proving that the cycle exists. And the only thing that
Cycle of what exists?
the cycle of you paying for someone and someone paying for you.
Yeah, but do you think that cycle actually exists? So to your first question, I fully agree. I think it's innate. So smile card is not necessary if we're all connected to that innate goodness. But the truth of the matter is that we've lost connection to that. And for those people, this serves as a tool. Like if I didn't have a smile card, I may not have picked up my neighbor's trash. But it's kind of a fun game, and it helps me connect with that which is innate. So it's true that it's a tool for people for whom they may have severed that connection. But now your second question was, what is Karma Kitchen? So if you're saying that this is already going to happen.
I mean, the question is, what's the difference between you paying for yourself and the previous person paying for yourself? It's pretty much the same thing. You see what I mean? It's only different in principle, but not in practice.
Right. Well, I have a response to that because I've had a lot of people ask have that same question. It's like, hey, what's the big deal here? It's like you're just guilting me into paying for somebody else's meal. It's just much easier to do this.
It's not paying for someone else's meal. You are paying for your own meal, kind of, right?
Well, see, that's the whole thing. You're actually not. So when you walk into the restaurant, your meal is paid for by somebody before you. You could technically take a meal and walk out. Right? And there are many people who do, because we don't actually check to see how this is going to work. Maybe somebody's having a hard time. Maybe they're just laid off, or maybe they're just looking for, they just want to trust, or they just want to test, right? And so over the several years that we've been doing this, you see that. But what happens at a restaurant, so look at it this way, right? What happens at a restaurant is like, here's my $5, I have earned it, give me my order, and you bring something back in return, right? It's like me. Right? What's the data point that it's like going to your heart? It's like, I have earned this money, it's owed to me, and this is my meal, and you give it to me. Here you go, and you say, look, this gift, it's a gift. It starts with a gift. It's from people that I don't know in the previous week. Then it's like, I look at you, and it's like, oh, you're volunteering your time. Why are you doing that? Just for me, and I don't even know you. Oh, that's a gift, right? This guy's giving their time, making this whole meal possible. That's a gift. Then you say, okay, how do I pay forward? I don't necessarily know how. I could leave an offering. And who is that for? Someone I don't know. Someone like me in the next week. Right? So this whole process is very different than you going to McDonald's saying, I own this and this is for me. You have a comment and then one over there and then we'll go for it. I'll be short.
I just wanted to add that a key point to all this is anonymity, that there's nobody checking up on what you're doing, so you're free to respond or not in any way that you choose. That kind of takes the obligation aspect off, the guilt aspect.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's probable that McDonald's, you could tell yourself that I got this hamburger for free, and the $1 that I give it to you now pays for the hamburger for the next person? Do you see in principle it's still the same, right?
So imagine the toll booth, right? So on one day at a toll booth, everybody pays for their own meal. For their own toll, right? This is what we do every single day. You do your checks. Okay, we got $10,000 on this lane. The lane next to it, everyone pays for the toll behind them. Right? So at the end of the day, you have $10,000 there. What's the difference? What lane would you rather be in? I don't want to be in the lane where everyone is like paying their own. I want to be in that lane where I just pay. I'm driving a hoopty and I paid for the Mercedes behind me. I go home at the dinner table and I'm talking about this story, right? I want to be in that kind of world. At the end of the day, it's $10,000 in both of those lanes, but it's very different because there's a different kind of capital associated with that. Is what I would say. Go for it.
Okay, so this question is very much related to what we're studying in our class, and what I'm hearing you talk about is people taking responsibility for the well-being of the people around them. And a lot of my opinion is that we have a tendency in our society to delegate to centralized government and others, and there's a diffusion of responsibility where we don't feel responsible for the hardships that are around us. And I want to know if you feel any tension with those two, this sort of privately feeling responsibility for others. And you're doing this in an area which is very liberal, and it seems to be catching on, and I'm wondering if you feel that there's a tension between this tendency to delegate to essential power to take care of the poor and to take care of education?
The conflict between you yourself being the change and then delegating it to somebody else. I actually think that like to create big systemic change is only going to happen when small individual people start being the change. Because when you be the change, it actually creates a ripple effect, right? It affects those around you and then those around you. As Margaret Mead said, it just takes a few people who've really woken up to really change the world. That's what has always changed the world. So I don't really see a conflict in that. I actually think that big change is not going to come about by some central, it's like people need to wake up, right? If people have woken up and they contribute even in the smallest way, I mean, we see ripple effects of like you having paid for somebody else's meal. That woman at Karma Kitchen who cried last Sunday because someone else in the previous week paid for it. The guy who was paying for it may not have realized the impact that this would have, but it does. Every action that we do creates an incredible ripple. Right? And so part of the process for me is understanding the ripple that goes out. And I think for me, is that's really the only way that change is ever going to come. Last question, go for it. Did you have a comment? Yeah.
Yeah, it was more of a technical question. So charity focus is volunteer run, right?
Yes.
So like, how do you keep your volunteers committed to like delivering the task? Because I did an internship with a nonprofit startup over last summer, and it was entirely volunteer run as well. And the problem that we have is that like when people are busy with their work, like it all falls back to that one person.
It's like if you're having a hard time in your relationship, I should be repeating these questions, sorry, I forgot. It's like, let's say you broke up with your boyfriend, you're still gonna go to work because you need the paycheck to buy all your toys and pay the rent, right? But volunteer work, maybe, I would like to cancel. So how do you deal with that? Well, at a systemic level, I can talk a lot about that, but at a systemic level, you need to have enough redundancy, you need to have enough checks and balances. It looks very different than a traditional organizational structure. But at a subtler, at the level of values, you have three categories of volunteers that I've seen. One is they come in, they volunteer, and they say, what's in it for me? I don't like doing this, I like doing this, what's in it for me? And that's reasonable. When I started building websites for nonprofits, I like to make websites. It was like, hey, what's in it for me? I get a lot out of this, at a very tangible level. So that's reasonable. Then there's a second category of people, they do it for the mission. I'm ready to do grunt work, but I'm ready to do it for the mission. So it's like they're very mission driven. But then they get attached to the mission, and that mission, over time, if you have too many of those people, it creates a lot of organizational ego. And so then you have the third category of people who are doing it for the values, who are doing it for their inner transformation. And what you need is a balance of all of these people in the ecosystem. And so your ecosystem is only going to scale up to the degree that you have enough strength at these levels, because otherwise you just won't be able to deliver. At the end of the day, you have projects, you have real things to do, and if you can't get them done, I mean, we're running, more than a dozen portals with 300,000 members and millions of people coming to it, right? And you just can't deliver any of that unless you have a good backbone of, these different kinds. So it's like there's no quick solution to this. It kind of builds up, and I would say it builds up very much from like the bottom out. That's it. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much.
It breaks my heart to stop Nipun talking, but there's a class that's going to come in here in 2 minutes. So we need some voluntary action now. If people can help dismantle the cameras and take this outside and just help us close up, it'll be very appreciated. You can continue to ask him questions, but no later than maybe 15 minutes from now, because I know he has a dinner engagement, and when he starts answering questions, and he really focuses on service, but he needs to be somewhere else. So,
But I'm happy. Give me a hug. That's fine. There's a smile card.
And take as many smile cards as you want.